Dr. Lee, that was a fascinating presentation. Thank you very much. I'd love to dig in a little bit more about your background. How did you actually come across this topic? What got you involved in gut microbiome, trying to decode that universe?
Well, my background is as a scientist. I'm what's known as a vascular biologist. Vascular just means blood vessels. And so my research has really taken me wherever blood vessels actually go. As it turns out, the gut and the circulation are very closely connected in ways that I didn't even appreciate when I started my career. But now we know very clearly that the gut bacteria are sending signals through the bloodstream that can influence our brain, influence our organs, our hormones, and also influence healing in many different ways. And that's what's leading me to think about longevity. Now, my background is in the field of angiogenesis.
Which is your organization?
Which is my organization, the Angiogenesis Foundation. Angiogenesis is a term that is describing angio, blood vessels, genesis, how the body grows them. And it's a fundamental process for defending health. You need blood vessels everywhere. There's 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels in the body, and these are the highways and byways that take the oxygen that we breathe and the nutrients that we eat and the medicines that we take to every single organ in the body. So how did I get involved with gut is fascinating because this goes back a few years ago. I realized that I saw a paper that now a colleague of mine at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, published. And this was looking at wound healing. This is exactly how I got involved with this. When you have an injury, a wound, you need blood vessels to be able to heal the wound. So if you've ever scraped your knee, you have a scab. If that scab comes off too early, it's bright red underneath. That's angiogenesis. To heal a wound, fundamentally, you need new blood vessels to grow, to bring that oxygen and nutrients for healing, and for the cells, the tissue, to grow around it. Well, what I read about was a bacteria in the gut called Lactobacillus reuteri. Never even heard of it at the time. That was being done by this professor at MIT, and showed that if you put this bacteria in the drinking water of an animal, of a lab mouse that had a wound on its back, that would actually speed up wound healing. Amazing. It was quite stunning to me that bacteria in water would actually influence the healing of a wound. So I reached out to this professor. Her name was Professor Susan Erdman. And I asked her if she knew anything about the mechanisms of wound healing. She did not. So in my organization, we kind of are a catalyst, a coordinator of academia and government and industry. And our view is if we can actually better understand, if we identify discovery and we can move groups together to help us understand it, perhaps we could actually push the whole field along. So I reached out to Professor Erdman and I said, what's the mechanism? She did not know. And I said, well, wound healing requires angiogenesis. Would you like to do a collaboration and we can work together to figure out how it is that a gut bacteria could actually influence wound healing? So she said
yes. But at
yes.
that point, you were not thinking about cancer. You were not thinking
well,
about all the other
we've
topics.
always worked on cancer.
Really?
I mean, so when we started my nonprofit organization, the Angiogenesis Foundation, in 1994, we looked at angiogenesis, blood vessel growth, as the common denominator of health, but also the common denominator of disease. So we felt that the common denominator strategy for thinking about better health was a powerful one, because it's, whereas most organizations look at individual diseases, breast cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and they They're inch wide and a mile deep. We felt, what if you could actually cut across all those vertical silos with a common vision, a common approach? And that's really what my organization, the Angiogenesis Foundation, has been about. So we've been involved with cancer, blindness, heart disease, diabetes, wound healing. That's the language that my organization speaks. So when we look at wound healing, we are able to take the fruits of knowledge from cancer research, apply it to healing for surgery, to see, well, what's the common denominators? How can we learn something from it? So what was amazing about this collaboration we did with MIT is we did an experiment where we funded an experiment, but we also guided the experiment. We also analyzed the results. We became players, in actually doing the research. And what we found was that this bacteria, Lactobacillus reuteri, gut bacteria, in drinking water, so it's almost like supplementing, right, in the lab, in a very controlled condition, would get the bacteria in the gut, and if you had a wound that needed to be healed, taking that bacteria in the drinking water would grow more and faster blood vessels in order to be able to accelerate the wound healing. In fact, it doubled the rate of wound healing, zipped it shut, and then when we actually looked under the microscope of the wound, it doubled the number of blood vessels that you need for healing.
And that common denominator can be applied, the same kind of mechanism, to cancer, heart, whatever.
Brain health, heart health, women's health, and indeed, this whole issue about longevity
Has this been kind of productized? Has it been launched as a medicine or
So what's interesting
supplement?
so this is the type of work that we're doing. So Lactobacillus reuteri, where do you get it? Well, there's a company in Sweden that was responsible for supplying that healthy gut bacteria for the research. Fast forward a few years later, they now have a probiotic out of it. I did the research, so I know the value, the actual mechanisms behind this. So I take it every day. It happens to be something that I kind of feel like, it was cooked in my kitchen, so I know. Now, we did not intend to do the research to spin off a product, but instead we have taken, I would say, the same approach we've taken for cancer medicines. Can we catalyze something? Can we engage other players to come in to see what the opportunity is? And then, we celebrate when there is a commercialization.
Yeah.
So there is a probiotic.
There's a democratization process. People can access it and
by the way,
most of the benefit.
And what we love, and this is a great example of how I really got into the gut microbiome. What we love about it is that one match strike that you can ignite a fire can create, not just a candle, but you can actually grow like a whole bonfire out of it, so that many different directions can actually occur. It's not just a small flame, it's a big flame. So subsequently, the same bacteria, Lactobacillus reuteri, has been shown to boost the immune system, suppress tumor growth for breast tumors and colon tumors. It's been shown to text message your brain, both in the lab in animals, but also in humans. And this bacteria prompts your brain, triggers your brain to release a social hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is that hormone that your brain naturally releases when you're happy. For example, if you go to the airport...
Different from dopamine.
Different than dopamine. Dopamine is sort of a reward hormone. Oxytocin is a happy exhilaration. So if you go to the airport to pick up a friend that you haven't seen in a long time, and they come out of the gate or out of the exit, and you run up and give them a hug, that good feeling you have is oxytocin. If you have a kiss, not a peck on the cheek like your grandmother, but a good French kiss, that's oxytocin. So it really is a different brain hormone, but amazingly, this is a gut bacteria that can heal. heal the wound, heal the skin. Can actually heal the mind too, because in terms of its social hormone effects, and this has societal impact. And then the other thing that I'll tell you I wound up doing is taking this probiotic as a chewable. I buy the kind you can chew because subsequently in human studies, it was shown that this bacteria can help restore the health of your gut microbiome in your mouth, and it kills the bacteria that causes cavities.
So it's an all-encompassing bacteria that's just a healing factor.
Exploring the different roles that this one bacteria can play. But this is actually how I got into it. This is how I got into the gut microbiome, because I once we broke through with these type of discoveries, I began to ask, well, what other bacteria are they and what can they do as well? And the more we looked, and this is right at the, I would say this is right at the inflection point when more and more people began to recognize the importance of the gut microbiome. That's when the gut microbiome and cancer therapy started to collide.
Oh, you start seeing patterns everywhere.
Patterns everywhere.
But this original Genesis bacteria that you discovered, so you're saying now you can purchase it as a product?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at these products, now, you know, I'm very careful not to do specific product promotions.
Sure.
As a researcher, because you know there's a lot of room for everyone to actually get involved in the space.
But can I ask? Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a question about governments or states, councils throughout the last few decades have been putting a variety of different chemicals or bacteria or so on in, for example, drinking water. So in Armenia, for example, where I'm from, we have a iodine deficiency. So there have been many discussions, because it's a landlocked country, how do we pump iodine back in the water, because people are developing thyroid enlargements and cancers and so on. How can we make sure that it's back in the system? So they are looking at putting iodine into the water. Is this something that at one point we could put in water, or other?
Oh, it's a very
widespread, because it has such a high healing factor.
You know, it's a really clever idea. I think that's the kind of vision that's worth exploring. Yeah. I get excited to think about that. But you know, it's not a new idea, because if you think about the gut healthy bacteria, it's been done in many food products already. Yogurt naturally contains bacteria. Now yogurt makers are supplementing and adding healthy bacteria, specific healthy bacteria into.
But it's different bacteria from the one that you were mentioning.
Yes, well, you can add that one too, but there's a variety of different bacteria. If you think about cheese, now I generally don't promote people. I encourage people to eat a lot of cheese, saturated fat, high in sodium, but I think it's important to be fair and balanced about our food and not become an extremist in terms of only saying that you have to be a vegetarian or a vegan. It turns out that cheese is a probiotic food as well, and that one bacteria, Lactobacillus reuteri, actually is the starter bacteria for Italian Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. So again, you know, helping us understand that, in fact, throughout history and in many cultures, the addition of these bacteria have been already present in many of our foods. So the idea of actually being even more deliberate, even more scientific, to be able to fortify a water supply. If you can put iodine, if you could put chlorine, if you could put fluoride in the water, well, those were mid 20th century ideas. Where are we in the 21st century? Maybe making water a probiotic as well. It's a brilliant idea.
We don't know how it will fly. We don't know how people will take it. But it's for me, if you're saying there's a common denominator that's going to heal a lot of these wounds, take care of a lot of these hurts. I think that's a
Well, we normally
brilliant thing to just
we would
promote.
normally not think of bacteria in our water supply as a beneficial thing, right? We normally think about clean water developing countries, the effort of not having enough clean water, so we're trying to purify the water. Well, maybe the idea, from an innovation perspective, which is what my organization does, how do we think outside of the box? Maybe what we should be doing is actually treating water with healthy, beneficial bacteria. By the way, there's another, I told you that this bacteria can actually heal a wound given as a probiotic in the lab. So in my work with surgeons who are in the wound healing field, the assumption for wounds that are not healing is that they're infected and you must kill the bacteria. They call it a biofilm on the wound. And that's really been the mantra, we have to get rid of the biofilm, we have to get rid of the bacteria in order for the wound to be clean so it can actually heal. So some years ago I came up and I was asked where the future of wound healing was. And I suggested something similar. I said, maybe in the future we're not going to be removing all the bacteria in a wound, but maybe we're actually going to be treating the wound with bacteria. And at the time, my surgeon colleagues were shocked that I said that. Are you kidding me? Why would we put bacteria into a wound? And I said, well, if you see the research that I'm seeing and seeing where the future directions are, maybe bacteria could be a surgeon's best friend to actually help the wound heal better.
Just the way you're adding bacteria to the gut in order for the gut to heal.
Exactly.
Amazing. Can you tell us more about angiogenesis? Angiogenesis.
Yes. Well, I got my start in an angiogenesis research lab in the lab of the pioneer. His name was Dr. Judah Folkman. He was a Harvard professor. He worked at a children's hospital, and he was my mentor, one of the most inspiring figures I've had in my life. He was like Leonardo da Vinci in medical research. He could see the biology of blood vessels in a way that hadn't yet been proven by research, but he was a visionary. And as a student, I was a medical student at the time, under his wing in the lab, we got to learn how to think about the future and how to think about biology, how to put together, what could be. Science goes where you imagine it is one of his quotes. And so we learned how to imagine and how to speculate, how to observe, and then how to prove using research. So angiogenesis is now a well-established field of research looking at how the body controls the blood vessels that are necessary for our circulation.
And you launched it in 94.
We launched my organization in 1994 because I observed in the laboratory, in the university laboratory, the enormous potential that angiogenesis could have, not only as a research field, but as a field that could have healing for cancer, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, stroke, 70 different diseases as a common denominator. My vision was at the time, if you could pull the bow back and send a single arrow through 70 diseases, maybe that would be a new way of approaching what was seemingly so difficult for any one effort to achieve. I mean, think about all the money spent for breast cancer, or all the money spent for Alzheimer's, and we have progress, but incremental progress. So my thinking was maybe we just need a different business model to attack this. And so angiogenesis is a common denominator approach to both health and disease.
You're quite a pioneer, because in 94 we were not thinking about this. We were just blindly consuming whatever was put in front of us and not really being conscious. Now I think if you agree, it's a different time. People are a lot more aware. There's a lot more information, data, videos, and as such out there about what to consume, how to consume, and so on.
So what's interesting is that, you know, we talked just now about how I got in to connect
Yeah.
healthy gut bacteria with blood vessels in healing. But I have to go back a little bit to say that when we started at our organization in 1994, we already knew that dietary factors, foods that you could eat, could influence blood vessels. But when we started, we made a very deliberate decision to begin working on helping to foster the development of more traditional medical treatments, future medical treatments, but in a traditional sense, biopharmaceuticals, medical devices. And I'll tell you why we decided to do that. We felt in 1994, just as you said, it was so early that it'd be premature if we just dove right at the food aspects for blood vessel health. But we could actually generate much more support and have better adoption of the ideas if we approach it from a drug development perspective.
Yeah.
So we worked for wound healing treatments, a growth factor that you could, like a gel you could put on a wound to actually speed up wound healing.
Amazing.
That became FDA approved. Next, we worked on a cancer drug that could cut off the blood supply to tumors, starve a cancer. That was Avastin, developed by Genentech, FDA approved, improved survival in colon cancer. So this was now, let's say, 10 years after we began. So it was pretty quick progress by nonprofit terms. The next year, 2 years later, there was the first treatment to prevent blindness by preventing blood vessels from going in your eye. And since there's been 1 or 2 new treatments coming out every year. So we've had 47 some, and growing treatments that sort of notches in our belt of coming out of our field. It's been very, very productive.
All based on the common denominator.
Based on the common
factor.
denominator,
Yeah.
and really sharing the knowledge from one field.
Yeah.
What are we learning in wound healing that we could apply to cancer? What do we learn from cancer we could apply to eye disease? So we could literally hop across vertical silos. If
What
you
a
think about
story.
one of the biggest challenges, I think, in the research and development world for medical therapies, it's that everything is in its silo.
Yeah.
And competitive, and the silos don't talk to each other. The competitors don't like each other, and the various silos and the different disciplines don't talk to each other. So we became the honest third-party broker that could actually communicate and learn the languages. So we could become the United Nations of health through angiogenesis, and it's worked out very, very well for us. So what happened is that once we had, I would say, critical mass, maybe 20 or so new treatments that already come out. I mean, 20 is a lot, okay? And they were
My
all...
book 1 is already a great success. You know, if you're able to heal cancers and heal people,
I dreamed of having just one
47
that would be successful. But once we figured out this model works well, we couldn't help ourselves but keep on going. But around number 20 of successful drug development, what we said is that, you know what, maybe now's the time to go back and bring back the food aspect of it. Yeah. So I got to take you back to the beginning. 1991, there was a research paper from a Greek researcher who was working in Switzerland for a German scientist's lab. Already 3 different cultures. I'm going to add a 4th. They were working with a material that was urine from Japan. And the urine came from villagers that were outside of Okinawa, a farming village, where mostly vegetarians, and the urine was collected for hormone analysis. But this young Greek researcher named Ted Theophotis found something else inside the urine of these vegetarians. They ate plant-based diet, mostly soy, a lot of soy, and he found in the urine, in the lab, a big spike of a substance in the urine that that's not made by the human body, only comes from soybeans. And this plant-based spike he was able to identify as a natural bioactive that comes from soybeans called genistein. And when he tested it in the laboratory, it really powerfully improved the health of the circulation. It could cut off the blood supply to tumors. It could restore good, healthy blood vessel function. Amazing, right? And this is out of the soybean discovered in the urine of people who were actually consuming soybeans. And this really became the building blocks for my organization and my own approach to food, which is, let's look in the natural world.
Yeah.
Let's find out what Mother Nature put into her food. Not just one substance, but many different substances. Let's try to define the biology so we understand what it's doing in the body. It's not just about the food. It's every bit about how the body responds to what you put inside it, what you feed it. Now let's look at the evidence in people. Do you find it in humans, in human tissue or fluid? Does it do anything beneficial? And then go to the laboratory to figure out how does it work. So this really is the umbrella that through which I actually have been studying as of now more than 300 foods.
When you...
Well, 1991 was when this first paper came out.
Yeah.
We started the Angiogenesis Foundation in 1994, but we very quietly nurtured this idea. But I would say we began doing this in earnest in 2000.
Okay.
Year 2000.
And did you get a lot of resistance? It feels like that the traditional approach would say, food, it doesn't matter, it's all in...
You know, I have to say, we've been very fortunate, I think, using our model for the nonprofit, all based on science,
Yeah.
all based on data, based on communicating concepts clearly in a exciting way to the medical community, the health professionals, but also exciting to and hopeful for the general public, including patients, right? So I always jokingly tell people when they ask, well, did you meet resistance from the pharmaceutical industry or from medical doctors who don't believe in food? I say, look, my approach is always to show data.
Yeah.
Right? As I've done at the ADAM program, you show people data. You show them real research results. And then you have to interpret it and let people come to their own conclusions.
Yeah.
But I think that my street cred, I always tell people, is that, like, I've been involved with drug development. You don't have to tell me about how difficult it is to do clinical research, to design clinical trials, to generate that evidence. Every bit of that same priority exists in doing food as medicine research. So we literally just tear a page of the playbook from the work in biotech and pharmaceuticals, apply it to food. And so for us, it's a continuum. And the message is also a continuum. We don't say...
They're complementary.
They're complementary. We don't say that you don't need medicines, just eat food. We say...
Well,
listen,
you gave me that advice earlier to do with my own gut situation, and you said, go ahead with the antibiotics and then regenerate your gut. So I thought that was a brilliant both...
Food is a tool in the toolbox that does coexist today right next to the other biopharmaceutical toolbox. What's interesting from a certain perspective is that, before we had pharmaceuticals, before 1930s, all right, no drugs. That's all we had is our food, right? Somewhere after the pharmaceutical industrial revolution, which did transform modern healthcare, and there are many drugs that are life-saving. I would tell you, somewhere along the line, the medical community lost touch with what we've always had for thousands of years, dating back to Hippocrates. So now we're bringing it back. We're taking the differences. We're taking real science and putting it behind food and gut health and all the things that can influence, including blood vessels, immune system, brain health, women's health, longevity, all these areas of our mutual interest.
And like you correctly said, you're combining it with scientific-based modern medicine as well. So it's a whole encompassing
people
treatment.
Exactly. So people say there's food as medicine. So how does the food that you eat amplify your body's defenses, health defenses? That's food as medicine. There's food and medicine when you're sick. The best, most compelling examples with somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer. They're always going to wonder what they should be eating to help themselves.
Yeah.
Too often, their doctor, their oncologist, will say, I don't know what you should eat, or don't worry about it. What we now know is that there's a huge opportunity to improve your own battle, the chances of succeeding in your battle against cancer. If you eat the right foods and you treat your gut health, you improve your gut health well, that's not a optional choice. That's a life and death choice. And that's why many times I'll talk about cancer as an example for gut health and foods that you can eat, because number one, when it comes to cancer, it catches everybody's attention. Everybody's rapt listening to what they should be doing or what they could be doing.
Oh, they're engaged at that point. It's a critical situation.
Exactly.
Before that, we're just indulging in whatever life throws at us.
Exactly.
So we've gone back to education and awareness problem. So how do we make sure that people are educated and aware, doctors as well, so they don't only approach it where here's this pill, but here's this pill plus change your diet, do this, exercise, fast.
Yeah, well, education is indeed one of the cornerstones, I think, of advancing health and modern medicine. I can tell you, when I went to medical school, I had less than 1 week's worth of nutrition research or nutrition education. Less than a week, okay? I mean, that's ridiculous, right? In fact, we used to, as young doctors in training or medical students, we used to say, we used to dismiss it.
Was it because we just didn't know the correlation or the causation?
I think it's a bias that in the medical community that came from pharmaceuticals that had a lot of science behind it, and nutrition, which does actually have science, but wasn't the same kind of science. And so nutrition got dismissed by the medical community. I always thought that was wrong. I always thought, and this is where the work I'm doing now, you could take the same rigor, the same science, the same intensity that we use for drug development, and just crank the turret and point it away from drugs and crank it towards food. That's what we do. That's what I've been doing for almost 30 years now, developing the methodology, doing the research, looking for where the benefits of food are. And what's exciting about it, it's discovery. Because when you do this kind of work, and I can tell you, anybody who's watching or listening to this, who's a scientist will understand, the work of the scientist is never more exciting than when you're actually doing something that can lead to new discoveries. That eureka, the light bulb going off in your head. For me, this is what is great about food as medicine, gut health research, and longevity research is where kind of my own work is going in now. It's really exciting. It's like every day is a brand new day.
Yeah, it's a big universe of different possibilities that you're tapping into. So having said that, what are you excited about now? What is it that you and your organization are working on? Is there anything you can share with us?
Well, we are still very much, first, we're very committed to continuing the battle against disease using the very leading edge of biotechnology. So we'll never go away from that because it's central to what we do. However, the big opportunity that has immediacy is to really begin fleshing out our work in food as medicine. We are now beginning to look at differences between the varieties of the same food. So for example, question comes up, is organic better than conventional grown foods? Answer: organic is better, not because it has fewer pesticides, although that's good too, but actually organic growing situations increases the polyphenols in the foods. Why?
Can you tell us about polyphenols?
Yeah.
Can you define it? And
Yeah. So about polyphenols?
yes, please.
Yeah. So we've heard about the benefits of many foods, and those benefits come from natural chemicals that are found in nature, produced by the food themselves. And we call them, many of them, polyphenols, and they're the things that give the fruits their color. If you like to see this colorful, the colors behind berries, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, all those colors are coming from the polyphenols. Green tea, filled with polyphenols, coffee, dark chocolate, pomegranates, all of the colors and the flavors come from polyphenols. So polyphenols are are the treasure chest in our food. What we're now discovering is that these polyphenols activate our health defenses. So we're beginning to look at what's the best food that's out there. So,
But not like an inflammation mechanism as a defense.
Polyphenols can lower inflammation.
They lower the inflammation.
Yeah, they can lower inflammation.
Okay.
They can cut off the blood supply to cancer. They can improve your metabolism. They can help heal wounds faster. This is sort of this area of discovery. Different polyphenols for different functions.
Yeah.
And foods have multiple polyphenols, but we're in the process of identifying what
What's
they are.
interesting is you mentioned fruits, vegetables, coffee, tea, but you didn't mention meats or fish.
So they are to be included as well.
Are they? Okay.
Let me tell you the differences. We know overall, when you look at human health or animal health, plant-based foods by far confer the greatest health benefits. The dietary fiber in fruits and vegetables and nuts and legumes help feed our gut bacteria, our gut microbiome, which then lowers inflammation, improves immunity, helps accelerate healing, improves brain health, extends longevity. So that's what's partly why plant-based eating is good. Polyphenols, dietary fiber, but contrary to what many people in the health and wellness community say, it turns out that fish and some meats can also be beneficial. And seafood has been shown to people who eat more seafood, 2 to 3 servings of fish a week, have better, longer longevity. Most likely because they have healthy omega-3 fatty acids that are present in the flesh of the fish. And people say, well, that's only tuna, right? Or salmon, right? No, actually it turns out that, again, this is what I do in my organization. We just put glasses on that allow us to be open-minded to explore anything. So we try not to approach any subject or any project with bias. Mm-hmm. How do we know that meats or fish don't have bioactives? Well, we know fish does, omega-3s from the ocean, and not just the big fish, but shrimp, lobster, squid, clams, mussels, they all have omega-3s, okay? And you can figure out how many mussels you need to eat to get the equivalent of a salmon, for example. And it's just a bowl of mussels that can actually do, about a dozen mussels will actually do it. But going beyond the omega-3s, which are not polyphenols, this is another category of bioactives. There are polysaccharides, there's peptides, proteins in fish. So Mediterranean sea bass or Chinese black bass, you actually have peptides that can heal wounds faster by stimulating angiogenesis.
But you wouldn't completely convert to a carnivore diet, because it's something I've been considering.
Yeah, so
I've met and trained with a lot of people that say, oh, I used to have a knee pain and joint pain, inflammation in the sinuses and so on. I've been on carnivore diet for 2-3 months and it's completely cleared.
I guess I have to sort of state my position on diets.
Yeah.
Diets tend to be fads that are carefully designed by a passionate individual or a group of individuals that spreads wildly. I'm not a big fan of diets because they're hard to sustain over a lifetime. You can do it for a few weeks or maybe even a few months, but very hard to do it beyond that because they tend to be extreme. I am somebody who enjoys eating tasty foods, many different kinds of tasty foods. So, because that's my orientation, I don't like being restricted to a diet. Diets are very restrictive in general. As it goes to sort of like the carnivore diet is one way of dieting, the fasting diet, keto diet, there's many different types, the South Beach diet, there's many different approaches to dieting. They all have their benefits. The biggest one is that if you are trying to follow a diet, for the period of time that you are able to maintain that usually somewhat extreme way of eating, you're probably not eating a lot of junk. Even if you're eating all meat, you're probably not eating as much junk food, all right? Mostly because you're more mindful of your diet. I would say for me, I definitely endorse plant-based eating. Seafood, if you like it and can get access to it, is also another healthy food to eat. And then the rest of the categories, the livestock and poultry type of area, the chicken, duck, pork, beef. Listen, they're good sources of protein. You want quality food, properly raised so that the flesh is as healthy as possible. Generally, overconsumption or sole consumption of meat puts a lot of saturated fat into your body, which in the long run, not over a couple of months, but in the long run, over a couple of years, is not going to be as good for your body as a more balanced meal with lots of plant-based foods. And then, how you prepare meat can also take something that's the good protein in meat. You can actually easily start to add chemicals to it. For example, if you grill meat, who doesn't love a good grill, right? Some sort of meat, to go on a holiday out by the beach and you have a grill. The problem is that the fats that drip from meat into the flame, that flashing that you see of the smoke and the soot and everything else, that turns into chemical carcinogens. And the char that, who doesn't like a nice crispy flavor to that?
What if it's natural wood, or if it's not charcoal, store-bought charcoal, if it's natural wood that you're cooking on, is that still causing an issue?
It has to do with the property of the meat. There's a chemical reaction that can take place just with any kind of fire. So what I would encourage is eat plant-based foods, spend most of your time on plant-based foods. When you're planning a meal, I say, normally, what do? You take the protein, the meat or the fish, and then later the sides or the vegetables. I say flip the script on yourself. Plan for the veggies as your main. Think about it. Think about it first. And then look for the animal or fish protein on the side. By the way, you can actually get good protein from plant-based foods as well. But I think that because I take a scientist's approach, I'm pretty agnostic. If a fish has got a peptide, a protein that can actually do something good for healing, great. Score one for the fish, okay? Animal protein, or animal meats. I have to say that processed meats, the sausages and salamis, the deli meats,
it's a no-go.
Those actually have been categorized by the World Health Organization as a class 1 carcinogen because there's enough evidence to suggest that eating a lot of that meat actually is not good for your health and in fact increases your risk of certain types of cancer.
So if you could define, in the spirit of Atom, if you can define the problem in the industry to do with gut microbiome, and then possible solutions out there, and what we could do next as a community, how would you categorize that? How would you define that?
Yeah, so the opportunity is that we are drinking from a fire hydrant of discoveries on the gut microbiome, realizing now very clearly that most of the bacteria in our gut can be healthy bacteria, and that healthy bacteria can transform our health. It's not the only thing, but it's a major thing that until recently we've missed. We hadn't even thought about. So every day there's new discoveries of what a healthy gut microbiome could actually be doing. That opportunity, that excitement, that potential is also the challenge. And the reason it's a challenge is because there's so much information, so many discoveries coming out, that in the enthusiasm to quickly translate the information to a product or something the public can do, it's easy to misinterpret or overinterpret what's been discovered and try to quickly create a product that's not proven, the quality might not be the optimal, maybe the statement that's being made, the claim, is overblown, because put a scientific finding into the hands of a marketing agency, and I guarantee you that if it's aimed at the consumer, the danger is losing the details of the accuracy of the science. And so I think that that's one of the challenges is the quick to market, quick to application, and then many good qualified people doing the research, but there's a lot of people who are not qualified to translate that research, but are salesmen to the public about the subject.
So if you rush into it, you also have the chance of destroying the chance of something actually valuable
and then,
getting into
and
the
then you
market.
can devalue the opportunity by sort of spoiling the milk, so to speak, with inaccurate or unresponsible messaging.
It's an interesting problem to have. You're basically saying there's so much happening in this field. It's so exciting that you almost have to slow down to make sure you're documenting correctly.
And messaging correctly. Because I think that anything that's science-based that can transform lives, you have to do responsible messaging. That's something that we've learned at the Angiogenesis Foundation is so important, is that if you're going to introduce something new, if you want people to get behind it, you want the wind in your sail, not against you, you have to always tell the truth. Science is the truth. But you have to interpret the science. It can be very difficult to explain science. So that's a whole other challenge, which is how do we train the right communicators, right? Just because you're an investor, just because you're an entrepreneur, just because you're a clever marketer doesn't automatically qualify you to be a good translator. So I think one of the opportunities for a group like Adam would be not only to catalyze the development of new products that can change lives and change societies and improve the world, but also to create the infrastructure and to guide the training of the messaging so that the products that are emerging, the translation of the discoveries into application is accompanied by really responsible messaging. And then I think the other opportunity is really
data and evidence.
Data, evidence.
Yeah.
And I
more
think,
causation than correlation in my...
Well, so I think this is the other thing that one has to be, take a fresh approach. When you're talking about a pharmaceutical, and again, my street cred is that I've been involved with many different biopharmaceuticals. The idea of designing a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial, running it through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, getting an FDA approval or regulatory agency approval, and then conducting phase 4 studies. You know, the average cost now for one drug is over $1 billion, actually going closer to $2 billion. Takes a decade, odds of failure, 10,000 to 1, okay? And, you know, the general public will never miss, they'll never know what they missed for a failed drug. But for food, which has immediacy, that can change lives right away. And there's very little downside for a healthy food to be eaten, right? I mean, in fact, it's almost all upside. So that's where I think the challenge is how much evidence do you need to encourage people to eat fruits and vegetables? Well, enough to actually be responsible. I mean, enough to actually to communicate what the new discovery and
But
understanding
you don't
is.
need the billions and the thousands
You don't need
of
the
clinical
billions,
trials.
and you don't need the decades, all right?
And a dozen years of waiting for an approval.
But you do need to
Yeah.
be responsible. And so I think this idea that this debate that people juggle the words causation versus association,
Yeah.
I think it's an important concept, but you can't treat a food like a drug.
Yeah.
It's not right. These are two different concepts, right? It's sort of like, I'm just trying to think through, pop music, popular music versus symphony, classical music.
It's still music, but not the
Both
same
music,
thing.
but they're
Yeah.
completely different genres. And you would
Good
never
analogy.
put the same level of critical evaluation of Beethoven's symphony to Lady Gaga, nor would you flip it that way. And I think that what's really important is to recognize both our medicines and foods are important in their own right.
And they have their role to play.
They have the role to play.
Going
And
back to the advice you gave me, take the antibiotics and then build back up your...
It's not
microbiome.
always food as medicine. It could be food and medicine. And this is what I hope, by the way, something that I think would be another opportunity for Atom is if you're trying to change healthcare, make sure that one of your target stakeholders are the healthcare professionals and training them, educating them. All right. Most people who are not doctors don't appreciate the how difficult it is to do the education. I mean, as a doctor myself, I can tell you, 4 years preparing to go to medical school, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of training, of practicing, and then your career. So you've spent 12 years learning 4,000 years worth of human Western medical knowledge. There's not a lot of room to...
It's never been put that way. That gives it a perspective, yeah.
Not a lot of room for integrative information from Asia, from Egypt, from Armenia, the traditional healing routes, and not a lot of room for the new science of the gut microbiome as well. So what are we going to remove from the old curriculum to actually put in the new stuff? This is one of the big challenges. Perhaps the new media, new technology, AI, immersion learning, perhaps this will actually give us a more modern way to put this information into people. But I will also tell you that the older generation of doctors that are out there today, let's say people in their 50s and 60s and older, the doctors in the community, all right, the senior doctors of today, they were trained in an era where they didn't get any nutrition education, bacteria are all bad, pharmaceuticals are the only way to go. And, it may be difficult to teach that older dog a newer trick, to use an American phrase, okay? But I will tell you, the good news is that when I speak to and see and teach the younger generation of medical doctors, the people going through medical school, these are the people that grew up with social media, okay? They are very health-oriented personally. The doctors I trained with, they were smoking cigarettes on the cardiac unit. They would take a break from the cardiac intensive care unit and go into the smoking room for themselves, and they were overweight.
I've actually seen it firsthand.
You've seen it
I've seen
firsthand,
it,
yeah? Right.
I went to a heart surgery when I was 16 years old. 2 heart surgeries, wanted to be a doctor. And my aunt took me to 2 children. There were 2 separate occasions, obviously. And the surgeon was smoking in between the surgeries. And for me, it was just a conundrum. How can he smoke and know that what it does to the heart and the lungs and the body?
And the good news is that the newer generation, the young generation, the up-and-comers,
they're more open to new information as well, learning new things.
And they care about themselves.
Yeah.
I always say, and
Culture's
again, this is another Americanism, you can't talk the talk if you can't walk the walk.
Yeah.
And I think that what's good, the good news is that the younger future generation of doctors are going to be caring about their own nutrition, their own exercise, their own balanced lifestyle, their own sleep, their own gut health, their own quality of their foods.
So they're
right?
more apt to learning and finding these new paths.
And communicating it to their patients.
Talking about communication, how would you then take this vital information and communicate it to the population? Because we, as a population, are programmed not to think this way still. It's changing, but majority of people that you see going to shops, they're buying what's right in front of them without even caring to look at the ingredients. Earlier when we had breakfast, the first thing you did was pick up something and you carefully scanned the ingredients before you even sampled it. But people don't behave that way.
You know, I think it's changing. I do see more and more the general public, not just health enthusiasts, but just everyone's hearing
It's a slow process.
in the zeitgeist of the world. You know, I mean, there's so many things that are happening on our planet, in our nations, in the world today. We're beginning to also see, I think, interest and the budding of literacy in terms of our food, impact of food and health, and gut health. I mean, you know, you can go to even a grade school in America, and if you ask, you know, what is gut bacteria, they'll probably give you a pretty impressive answer that, oh yeah, you know, that's important, it's good for you, right? But think about, and this is the nature of change of public health, public education. It has to spread like wildfire, and it really has to be ground from the ground up. What I'm saying is that you have to educate the doctors who have the ability and the privilege of actually carrying that knowledge that their patients and the public is going to trust. So you need to really make sure that those people, the medical community, is well trained, well armed, and familiar, fluent. They need to speak the language really well themselves. But then the general public, it spreads, you know, sort of at the community level. There's sort of boots on the ground level of spreading the word. That's, by the way, why I started to write my books, Eat to Beat Disease, and then Eat to Beat Your Diet, and then, you know, I have a third book that is coming out that, based on my research on looking at longevity. But it's not about just simply extending the years. It's, as we talked about at Adam, it is about enhancing the quality of the years that we have. No matter how many years you actually have, you want everyone to be a great year. And that's, I think, where the emphasis needs to be. But this idea about the general public, I think it's spreading like wildfire. Now, think about this. 100 years ago from today, if you were to go to ask, you know, the average person on the street, what is a bacteria and what is penicillin, they probably couldn't tell you. I mean, those sound like Greek words to me. I have no idea what those are. Today, you go to a kid in elementary school and you ask what's a bacteria and what's penicillin, they'll probably tell you exactly what it is. And if you go to somebody who doesn't have a college education or a graduate education or a business degree or isn't trained in health at all, and you ask them versus you ask the president of any country, what's a bacteria and what's an antibiotic, I bet they'll give you pretty much the same answer. And this is the nature of health literacy. And I think this is also something that, you know, I'm very concerned about in playing my role in communications. How can I participate in global efforts to train healthcare professionals to have that literacy and fluency? It's two different things. Literacy is, you know, the material. Fluency is being able to speak it, right? And then how can we all play a role in raising the level of enthusiasm, endorsement, and engagement at the community level?
Yeah, and also not being afraid for the doctors, for that community, not to immediately shut these things down, just like the younger generations, to keep that open mind, to keep looking at this data that you're discovering. And
I have personally not encountered a lot of opposition to the data that I speak about, because I try to communicate it with the same type of language, the type of seriousness of purpose.
That's the literacy and the fluency. You're approaching it the right way,
Exactly.
speaking the right way. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that that's something that Adam really has a huge opportunity to work on. You know, you're going to bring the parties together, going to catalyze change and develop ideas, invest in the future to come up to make the world a better, to have a world a better future, make it a better place. Can't forget that literacy and fluency among the key deliverers, who are the healthcare providers, very, very important. I've spent 30 years doing it, you know, both in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and now food is medicine and gut health.
Brilliant end. I'm afraid we'll run out of time, but I think that's a great conclusion, and a lot more to talk about, hopefully another time, and dig in a bit more. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.